Good morning to Shaw viewers in Red Deer in central Alberta. It's Mayor Ken Johnston here this morning on a wintry February morning, and I'm privileged to be joined this morning by Councillor Vesna Higham. Councillor Higham is the Deputy Mayor for February, and we've served together for several years, and it's a treat to have her on board this morning.
Good morning, Mayor Ken, and good morning, community. Thank you so much for having us on this day.
Great. Okay, we'll dive right into it. So during last night's council meeting, City Council approved funds to cover the cost of mitigation strategies in the rail yards district for items such as enhanced business and resident engagement, security and cleaning. This is in response to issues that have been voiced by the surrounding businesses and property owners at the temporary shelter at Cannery Row. Mayor Johnston, can you talk a little bit about the discussion and debate that occurred around this topic last night?
Absolutely, and a great question. Thank you very much. You know, the debate really was in three pieces, if you will, three issues that council had to consider last night. The first one was the development permit, which is really what's called in planning language site specific. So in other words, it applied to the actual site of the shelter. The second piece was the mitigation strategy, which essentially was a strategy that considered the neighborhood impacts of the shelter and how the shelter would coexist in the immediate neighborhood. And then the third was the cost impacts of the development permit conditions and the mitigation strategy. And administration brought all three to council last night, sparked a very, very good debate, sparked amendments to the development permit, sparked amendments to the mitigation strategy, and sparked amendments to the costing of the strategy. And I think we landed in a very, very good place related to all of the concerns that were expressed not just by the shelter, but certainly by the business community and the neighborhood in general.
Thank you. Councillor Higham, can you tell us a little bit about why making this decision was so important for the community?
Absolutely. You know, after nearly 1 full year of the city looking to find an alternate location for the temporary shelter, you know, to provide reprieve to the rail yards businesses, we literally hit the wall. There was no other location that we could utilize to relocate the shelter. So it came down to either we didn't have a shelter during the next, 2 years or so until the permanent shelter is operational, or we needed to approve the existing Cannery Row site. And so council made that decision. For me personally, it was so critical, and I think council, reflected that very clearly last night. Since we made the decision to keep the Cannery Row shelter in place, it was critical. I called it a moral imperative to our community that we provide these mitigation strategies and that we put in conditions in the development permit that would enable the city to follow up with any issues that arise, and that would provide enhanced safety and security for the neighborhood.
Excellent. And also approved last night was the development permit, as you mentioned, and business license for the temporary shelter at Cannery Row, the final step to allow operations until February 1st, 2024. Mayor Johnston, can you speak a little bit too about what having this temporary shelter in place for 2 years means for the community and the operator?
Wow, that's a broad question, but I'm glad you asked it, because there's several factors that I would think of. The first one is it enables us to have some traction around really what the shelter is focused upon. The shelter is not a destination for people. It's not a housing project. It's designed as a gateway so that people can find housing. When communities have shelters, it's symptomatic of a housing need, and it's certainly symptomatic of mental health and often poverty and addiction issues as well. Shelters are symptomatic, but shelters are never designed as places where people abide and try to build a life and so forth. So essentially what it means for our community is we'll be able now to not only get through the mitigation process with the neighborhood and build good neighbor strategies, which I'm very optimistic. Councillor Higham spoke of the moral imperative, and I thought that was very correct. So not only the mitigation strategies, but it enables us now to look at a couple of housing pilots that we've put together in that shelter, a diversionary pilot, a transitional housing pilot, so that we can demonstrate to the community that the shelter is a gateway, not a location, not a locale, not a place to sort of hang your hat. The shelter is there to get you through, you know, that very critical point in your life where you're now seeking permanence in shelter and so forth. So I'm very optimistic that our agencies, our businesses, our city administration, the province will work together, come together, and define really what is a sustainable shelter for our community. We have an opportunity with provincial help to look at a permanent shelter situation in our city. We're very, very happy about that. But this temporary shelter, while not having the same focus or impact necessarily, will be a very good place to start in terms of what a proper shelter structure should look like. So it was I'm very, very optimistic, very enthusiastic, but there is certainly work to be done around it, without a doubt.
Thank you. Councillor Higham, do you have anything to add on that one before I move on?
You know, I think our mayor has covered it. I think I do have things to say around the costing and how critical it is that we share the costing and that we bring a collaborative approach to this project. I trust that's going to be a question upcoming. So I could answer it now or.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. So I think one of the critical points that Council raised last night, and Councillor Daw really hit the nail on the head when he talked about a three-legged stool. That, you know, look, at the end of the day, this is a provincial project. It is provincially funded. It is provincially operated, you know, overseen by the province. But, you know, in reality, it lands in our community and it affects our people, and it happens on our streets. And so, you know, the province is one leg, the city clearly is another leg, but the community, as well as the operator, the shelter operator, and the community represent that third leg. And it's so important that all three of these parties come together in a collaborative fashion to not just fund, but also to ensure the success of this operation in the community, particularly given the challenging history that we've had, you know, where we've had this piecemeal patchwork approach to shelter. We haven't had permanence. We haven't had a permanent location and those wraparound services that are so critical to the success of any sort of shelter or service related operation. So for me, that's why, you know, I was very grateful for some of the amendments that were made. Councillor Dirksen raised an amendment to reduce by 80,000. There was a component that related to sort of hard physical leasehold improvements on the site, fencing and waste receptacles, garbage bins. And the council did support that. So we removed $80,000, which our mayor quickly translated into 15% of the project. You know, we removed, and we are looking to the province or, you know, other parties, perhaps the owner of the property could invest in leasehold improvements on the site. And in this collaborative effort, we can all make things better for our community, but it is critical. It can't solely rely on the city. We can't be the only, you know, person to pick up the cost for these impacts to our community.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Last night, Council also approved an immunization policy that applies to members of City Council and volunteers appointed to Council boards and committees. Council voted in favour of the policy, which comes into effect immediately. Councillor Higham, can you talk to us a little bit about the process of reaching approval on this issue last night?
Certainly. Yeah, you know, this has been one of the most heart-rendering, delicate really challenging issues of our time. There's no question. There's been a divide in our community. We've heard that very clearly, and we are mindful of, you know, the rights of every individual within our community to have a position and to have a perspective on these critical healthcare, you know, issues in our lives. Last night, Councillor Dirksen brought forward a series of amendments to what was proposed by administration. And essentially, you know, look, there's a lot of detail. It took us a while to work through it, but essentially I'll summarize it down to the nutshell, which is that the proposed bylaw contemplated a mandatory response by council, meaning that you either had to be vaccinated and show yourself, report that you are vaccinated, or you need to provide regular testing solely in the confines of your work. So when you're going to a party, in your personal life, there is no mandate. But when you're attending functions, whether in person or at City Hall, for example, in public spaces, and you are representing the city, that's when the policy would kick in. So administration had proposed mandatory, and Councillor Dirksen in all of the clauses of the bylaw had proposed to change that to encouraged or an optional. So that was the essence of the debate. There were many iterations of it, but it came down to that.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, can you speak a little bit, Councillor Johnson, Mayor Johnson, can you speak? My apologies. Can you speak about what having this policy in place means to the community?
Yeah, thank you. I think Councillor Higham very ably touched on several points as to how it affects the community. But the first one, I think, you know, if any members of our community had the opportunity to watch council last night, what I was really impressed about was the respectful tone that was present throughout the debate. And, you know, as Councillor Higham said, you know, this is a divisive issue. It's tended to cause a lot of friction between us and so forth. And I think council really set a tone of respect that the community, I think, will appreciate. In fact, to Councillor Dirksen's great credit, he summarized his remarks with that very statement that he very much appreciated the respect of all his colleagues as he proposed the amendments that he did and his rationale and so on. So, you know, that was the first encouraging piece for me from a community perspective, that they could see their council tackle what arguably is I would say the flashpoint in our Canadian relationship right now with each other, and do so in a very respectful, extremely respectful way. Beyond that, and certainly as important as that, is at its heart, this is a health and safety issue for our community. So they have the comfort now that councillors are maintaining a safe workplace with employees, a safe workplace among each other, and a safe interaction with them when councillors are engaging on council business or city business, and so on. So those are certainly the first two, and then thirdly, I would say many councillors expressed this last night, and that is what I'll call is there's no double standard now between council and our city employees. You know, our city employees were required to follow this policy, which came in effect close to the end of November. And now council is showing its leadership by saying, we just won't, you know, have a policy for you and something for us, but we'll have the same policy, so that there is duality, if you will, between the folks that work at City Hall. And so those three things, I think, for me, were the largest, you know, sort of largest community impact. There's probably others, but those really resonate for me.
Thank you. In closing, I will go to each of you, and I'll start with you, Mayor Johnson. In closing, was there anything else from last night's meeting that you want residents to know about, or that coming up this month?
Well, I certainly mentioned the respectful tone, you know, which again, I don't think we can overemphasize how council did its business last night and how it's maintaining itself. That's important. At risk of stealing Councillor Higham thunder, my goodness, I wouldn't want to do that. But at risk of that, our public hearings, they're not very glamorous most of the time, and they're a little dry, and so on. But we made a decision last night, a unanimous decision last night, to have a site exception in our industrial park in Edgar, to allow a massage therapy clinic related to occupational injuries and the health of our employees in that area. And I really think fundamentally it showed how flexible council is as it relates to being able to integrate a business need in a zoning that often would prohibit it. And so I think that was very encouraging. So I hope I'm not stealing Councillor Highams' thunder, but those are things that encouraged me.
Councillor Higham.
No, listen, you can steal my thunder anytime you want, Mr. Mayor. You certainly have a flair for it. So listen, I was going to touch on that, but I will add an additional dimension to that concept, which is that, there exists this tension in planning where developers and business people, they need and look for that certainty within a community. You have predictability in terms of districting and zoning, so that what's going to be around you, what you would like to put into a development. So there is that significance where you need to have predictability, but you have to balance that against these times and what is sort of appropriate or reasonable in a certain area when a request comes before you. So I guess the messaging, just to add on to what the mayor has already stated, the messaging is that we really are this council and this city we're open for business in terms of it's a high strategic priority for this council. We have already worked through significant work on our strategic plan, which typically takes over a year, and we really have significant bones on that project to bring something forward to the community in the first quarter of this year for review and to provide input from the community. And I'll tell you, one of our highest strategic priorities is economic development within our community and to provide hope for our businesses to know that this council and this city, we are open for business and we support the development of our business community. Well, listen, I would certainly like to extend warmest thanks to Shaw for the opportunity for the mayor and the deputy mayor to converse with the community a little bit. I think that's another, we talk about strategic priorities, that's another one that was high on our radar, which is that we want to connect with our community more in this term. We want to deliver more information. We want to be open for, when citizens want to reach out with questions or concerns. So this is one piece in that, that strategic goal to connect with the community. So thank you very much for allowing us this opportunity.